morning, everybody. So happy to see you. So let's start with meditation. So can everybody hear me okay? Good. Okay, so take your attention inside. And as we did last week, we're going to merge the meditations that we started with in the beginning with the Om meditation that we're doing now. So allow your eyes to remain just a slit open so that you stay present to the environment. And then drop your attention to just below your belly button and feel into that energy center and allow it to expand. And the color is yellow like the sun. And my friend, the shaman named Mika Carew, calls this home base, safe place. So you feel into this energy center just below your belly button and allow it to expand and feel your attention drop into that center so that it's not just going back and forth between your ears, but actually your feeling and your attention is below your belly button. See how that changes your awareness as you remember to keep your eyes open just a slit. So it's like you're almost looking down at your nose. Then sitting up straight, you drop your attention all the way down to the center of the earth. And it doesn't matter how low you feel you can drop your attention. Just go as far as you can. And now from that same focal point below your belly button, raise your attention up out the top of your head to the center of the heavens. And in between, you feel this axis of your central channel. And you feel into the energy going through it, both up and down. And now we'll begin to engage the Om practice. First vocally, in whatever range fits your voice. Then we'll whisper 9 times, and then we'll watch the energy 9 times. So we'll only do it the 3 phases this time, not 4. So take a deep breath and we'll begin. Oh. Om. 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 And now, before moving on, ask that anything that's clouding your field, anything that doesn't belong to you or that's not in support of your highest best, please leave. And just run white, pure energy from above as though you're standing under a shower of white light. Allow that to cleanse every part of your being. Still holding your eyes open a slit and feeling this beautiful energy now running down from above through your body, cleansing everything. And now put in place around your energetic field, several inches away from your body, wherever it feels comfortable, create a semi-permeable bubble around yourself that allows in energy which serves your highest purpose and filters out anything that doesn't. Use your intention to put that bubble in place. Now, holding your attention still deeply inside yourself, open your eyes further and further. So you're experiencing yourself as deeply withdrawn and deeply present in the same moment. We welcome your questions. So the genesis of this particular meditation was that we noticed about a few minutes in that there was a lot of extraneous, not helpful energy in the field. And so whenever you notice that, it's important to stop what you're doing and run clearing energy, white adamantine particles from above. So you're standing under a shower of white light that's cleansing everything out of your field. And if you suspect that that's how you are when you sit down to meditate, it's best to do that first thing. Just let go of any darkness that you might be carrying or that might be in the environment. It doesn't matter. Blame is not the issue here. The issue is cleansing. You just cleanse yourself and your environment before you begin to meditate. Or anytime when you've started and you notice that your energy isn't particularly clean, you can just stop and do it and then resume wherever you want. And then the creation of the bubble is beginning to take our meditation off the cushion and into our lives. so that we're actually participating from a different place in ourselves and requesting an upgrade of the energy that we bring to every moment of our lives, internal and external. So how to participate arises as we deepen our practice. How may we serve this morning?
Good morning, Rebecca. It's Margaret.
Morning. How are you? I'm being very careful about not saying names.
I thought about that, but said it anyway. So I was hoping to get your insights.
Oh, you can say my name. I don't mind that at all.
Okay. So
Yes.
I just experienced the end of a serious romantic relationship, and
Oh, we're so sorry.
It really, a lot of what you just said speaks to the experience that I'm having. And when I'm not sure exactly what my questions are, so I'm just going to keep going.
Yes.
One of the questions that I have is when I am in my own energy and I am realizing that things are negative, and as you said, putting the bubble around myself, how do you avoid like any kind of spiritual bypass where you're in your own energy and you're centered there, but you see that the other person isn't in their energy, and you brought up that there's no blame or judgment, but could you speak to that a little bit, that dynamic? Because sometimes it feels to me like, even though I see what's happening and I know in myself that this is their work and I can't necessarily do anything in that moment, it still feels a little bit not necessarily like I'm superior, or does that make any sense? Like, because I know I'm not.
But you have the insight to see that there's an energetic difference.
Yeah. So how do you, as graciously as possible, speak to that to the other person? Is it possible?
Not in that moment. In that moment, the differential is too great. And so the person is going to have some reaction to they will feel judged by being told that their awareness is different.
Is there any way around them feeling judged?
Not in that moment. The only way around is to speak to their highest self in that moment from your highest self. So you can go to the Anasa temple in that moment and say what you have to say to their highest self. And then in another moment where there is some flow and interest in conscious awareness, you can teach the person the practice of standing under the shower of white light. And then, having had that conversation and that experience, the next time the moment arrives that person is in darkness and you are running light, then you can say to them, this might be a good moment to experiment with running the white light if you feel like it. And that way there's only a sharing and a gradual informing in a time and place when flow is possible. But when the darkness is present, flow is not.
Mhm.
And so you have to respect the person's choice of darkness, because it's always a choice, but they may not know that they have a choice. And that's why we say there's no blame. Does this make sense to you?
Absolutely. It's incredibly frustrating because I'm sure I'm completely not alone that people are attracted to the light,
Exactly.
but then they don't really want the light. I mean, they want
Well,
it,
it's not that they don't
but
want it, it's that they don't want to do the work in the moment of contrast. They cannot do the work. So the thing to do is to create an awareness of what to do in a moment of flow, so that they can actually feel the experience of the white light coming through their system and cleansing when they're already in the light, which does happen, especially at the beginning of a new relationship.
right. One of the dynamics I was thinking about this morning for my own personal self, because I'm also a teacher and a mother, is it's there's situations and relationships where being the teacher and letting go is so much easier. But in our partnership relationships, it's so much harder.
It is so much harder, but that means we have to be able to work while we're in the situation, to do our own work, to rise to our highest self and speak to their highest self in that moment, so that it prepares the ground for the awareness that can come to make the change. But you cannot address it in a moment of not flow in them and expect to be successful.
And I wonder if there's a level of attachment with a partner that isn't there with a friend or a child or your class, or do you know what I mean? For the outcome, maybe it's harder to let go of it not
Well, what happens is there's a
well.
desire to have it changed now, because you want to get back to that flow of the relationship. Both people do. But it can't happen when there's no flow. I mean, it can, but usually it requires some kind of fight to clear the energy, and then you
Mm,
start over. But there's been a great degradation of the field by
that,
that
that
battle.
right, exactly.
And
So
so that erodes exactly what you're trying to create.
which is different in a friendship. If you have a disagreement with a friendship, you maybe take a break or a couple days and think about your part, and but it
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
happen
not really
with
different.
romantic partners.
The intensity is different.
Okay.
The situation is not so much different, but the intensity and the desire
Desire.
for it to be something that it's not in that moment
Okay.
really clouds everything.
Mhm.
At the same time, because of that intensity, it's a great learning and growing experience, because if you can master being with someone else's darkness and speaking to their highest self from within you without saying a word in the external world, because that will be perceived as judgment and as, I'm better or higher, or my understanding is greater. However, that will be perceived as judgment.
Mhm.
And the the goal is not, the goal is to create flow. So you go where you need to go to create the flow. And so to create a flow in a situation that's blocked, you have to go above the situation,
Okay.
create
So
the
that
flow.
when
And
you realize the flow is stopped, that's when you stop talking.
yes,
Go up.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Yes. And the best is if the other person disengages and goes to be quiet.
But yeah, it's so tricky because it can
It's
also
so
be seen
tricky.
as a withdrawal. If you stop talking, then the person might perceive that you don't care, even though you've gone to your highest self. And it's just so tricky for me
It is
personally.
tricky, and don't try to talk until you're done.
Okay.
And then you can say something like, you use I statements. I feel like I need to be quiet a little bit to digest this. And so I don't have anything further to say in this moment.
And if they take that as a rejection, you just sit with that. You don't try and fix it
Well,
or
you can say, I know, I can feel that you're experiencing this as rejection, and I'm not intending it. It's not about rejecting you. It's about me needing to do work on myself, which is the truth.
it is the truth.
It is absolutely the truth.
But my experience is that even though I explain that, it doesn't stop the reaction from continuing. But then that's not mine. So I guess I need to decide what's mine and what's not mine. And
Well,
that,
also you're speaking in a context where you haven't already spoken to the highest self.
okay.
So try that and see how that filters down.
Okay.
Because we know you've mastered this with your children. You do it without even thinking about it.
Not even thinking about it, yeah.
Yes. And so it's bringing that same awareness to personal relationship. And you do it with your students. You are
Right.
a master of this, actually, except in a relationship where you really want it to be a certain way.
Mhm.
So the understanding is that 70% of people have no experience of what you're looking for.
Mhm.
So the odds of you attracting somebody with similar experience, unless you're, and even if you're in a place, ashrams are full of people who need to learn this.
Right.
And how far along they are is how far along they are. And so it's not necessarily a great place to look for a partner.
Right.
And the other thing is depth over time in relationship.
And maybe
Really, both people are committed to growing and changing together.
right. And the discernment of knowing when it's just not going to work at this time for these two people.
Yes. Yes. But, it takes as long to know that as it does to, really understand that both people are committed to the same thing. It's not something you know in a week.
No.
And it takes a long time for people to really be themselves in a way that is the truth of their being. And the words no longer tell the story, but the energetic connection does.
Mhm.
And so most of the work has to be done very, very early on. You begin working with the person's highest self.
Mm. Okay.
And their willingness to engage in that can be part of the, that initial infusion of good feeling that happens between people. You can engage the higher self much more easily in that phase and get agreement and, learn to introduce the white light before it's anything personal. And so that is a way, because, relationship is creative art.
Mhm.
And two people do this. all the time. So it's not like, you know, it's never just like this for forever. It will go like this. And then it will go, it'll be like riding a bicycle, you know, trying to keep the flow going. And then true commitment is commitment to that flow.
Yeah.
Both people to maintaining that flow, creating and maintaining.
Right.
And that's when you know you have something.
Okay.
And so you start at the very outset, desiring that for yourself and attempting to create it with the other person. And at no point do you make assumptions about who they are until you know and what their priorities are. Because people say anything and they believe anything. You know, you never know until you're with the action long enough to understand who they really are. And that changes over time too. And you have no idea how much change you made in the context of that relationship by exposing the person to a lot of new ideas and a lot of personal information about who they thought they were that may not be true. And how the thing about age is that most people, if they're not really working hard on themselves, they just become more and more of who they've always been. They become more rigid about you know, all the things that they've been protecting and projecting their whole lives. And so in that way, age is not so helpful. But if you've lived a life of flexibility and choice and spiritual, you know, continuous improvement, then different things are possible. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you so much.
So welcome. How may we serve further? So a topic's coming to mind that I think Andrew and I were both, my partner, Andrew, my husband, and I would both agree is baffling us at the moment. And that is the subject of generosity. Because we both, in our own ways, have been what others would consider overly generous in many situations in our lives, only to discover that you know, it feels after a certain time that there's judgment of our generosity as a form of insanity rather than creation of flow. And that's very interesting to us because, you know, with that judgment, then there's a form of rejection that we feel that it's just odd. And then on the other hand, there's generosity that we have received for no particular reason that comes and goes for no particular reason. And so we're kind of baffled by the whole subject at this point and waiting for some guidance and explanation about what's real in all of this. So we're putting that out there because we're baffled by our experiences in that arena. And we welcome your input. Because we experience generosity, of course, as flow, just another arena of flow, both coming and going. And generosity as a way of participating, both giving and receiving. And our patterns of generosity seem to be formed along with our matrix of belief at a very young age without our participation. And so it needs continuous awareness and upgrading. And it's possible that we're in a phase of increased awareness and hopefully upgrade. Because we have seen amazing generosity and amazing exploitation of others' generosity. And we've seen the whole experience, we think, and have participated in all range of ways from, you know, non-participation and trying to hold on to resources to completely sharing everything we have to, you know, giving away lots of medical care without requirement of reciprocity. And well, we've both done a lot of all of that in both directions. I can't say we've received a lot of medical care without reciprocity, which is interesting also, because it is clear that the flow doesn't happen in the same place, in the same, you know, you give in one place and it comes back in another place. But all of that's a little confusing right now. Andrew, do you want to add anything?
I think, except for the fact of in the flow or give and take of generosity, and there's this something that we perceive in the other person, and then that can lead to disappointment, feeling disappointment, which of course is a form of judgment, but it should take a certain form in the way it happens, in the way it's received, but nonetheless, it's there, and the question is, what to do with that. Suppress it, or to take it as lesson learned, be less generous, or is it really just a distraction?
So I imagine that most of you didn't hear that. So what he's saying is really another question. When you receive information that there's judgment about generosity, whether it be overly generous or miserly, that something to be paid attention to become less generous, something to be ignored, it's just a distraction, or is it information that we really need to take in and behave differently? Or transmute the disappointment to something else, which of course is the answer. Always we want to transmute disappointment into flow. And that flow is always the answer, creating more and more flow in whatever arena. And we bring up the physical generosity because it's really up for a lot of people right now. Gas prices have doubled, food prices have doubled. I mean, these things are hitting us really, for those of us on fixed incomes, it's really, it's a big change. And so those kinds of changes make for difficulty and contraction. And so to turn that contraction, disappointment, or whatever other arena that's happening, but this is one that's sort of common for all of us, to turn that into flow and really appreciate what we have. And the flow that we have access to within and around us. That's the real thing. And to understand that all of it is about flow.
It seems like keeping the flow is very much about letting things go. Can you expand on this, please?
Well, certainly keeping the flow and letting things go is where we notice it the most. You know, when everything's all flowing in and we have abundance, then we don't question it. And when we can afford to have the flow outward and there's no contraction involved in that flow, then also that's easy. It's when the flow gets constricted that it feels like loss and disappointment. And that's where our work comes in, to transmute that disappointment into flow itself. And that's very much a Ho'oponopono situation. I'm sorry I've stopped the flow because of my disappointment. Thank you for showing me the source of my own stopping of the flow. I love you. And understand that what flow is the same as what the flow in our cerebrospinal fluid, in our central channel, in our practice, in our energetic connection to ourselves, that is also flow. So everything we're talking about is flow. And sometimes it looks like we're winning, and sometimes it looks like we're losing, but it's all flow. And when we understand that that's what's happening, we know that if we just wait, the flow is going to change directions, because it always does. And so we ride the wave at the same time, communicating with our highest self, just as we spoke about in the context of relationship. When the flow has shifted, you, as it's happening, you move to your connection to your highest, however you can find it, and you begin working with yourself, with your own highest, to transmute whatever situation you're in to the highest it can be. And then time falls out of the equation, because you are doing your work in the moment as you are present with whatever flow is available. And it's a dance. And sometimes we're on top of the bicycle tire, and sometimes we're on the bottom. And it just keeps going. And to judge either end as success or failure is just a matter of perspective. And all of it is life in its magic. We're quoting a friend, magic, mystery, and miracle. Wally, if that's your backyard, it's really beautiful. Your camera slipped. Sorry, I mentioned a name. Yeah.
And I can always edit it out. People can write to me and I will edit it out. So naming the feeling / emotion can resume the flow.
Well, not just naming, but actually taking responsibility. It's ownership. It's I feel disappointed. I feel unseen. I feel whatever I feel feeling comes up. I feel negated. When you own your own feeling and begin to say Ho'oponopono through it to your highest self, that feeling transmutes to usually a different one. And then eventually there's just flow itself. And then you know you're back to center. Thank you. That whole conversation was really helpful for us. So you understand there's no superior, inferior anywhere. There is only discovery. And when we allow ourselves to participate in that way, then there's no danger, because there's no hierarchy. And truly, we are a field of information. We are not a field desiring control. But we want more flow for you in every dimension. And we want you to understand it so that you can truly live from a different perspective in yourselves. Spirituality is about self-discovery, not about creating a center in another person or another belief system or anything that's outside of you. It's about discovering the deepest part of yourself and learning to really participate in life itself from its core, from the basis of its evolution as it comes through us, and becoming a different person that's just flowing in that and sharing that with every person you meet. That's truly what it's about. And there is no field of our life experience that is separate from that endeavor. Nothing is separate. All parts are welcome. And there is the understanding that everything that has ever happened to a human being is available inside of us. Because we are a sum of the totality in the depth of cellular experience. It's actually in the space where energy and matter are the same. And that's found between the breaths. How may we serve further? How may we serve? Andrew? Brenda?
Other than everything that's not mine, please leave. I feel like I protecting myself from taking on others' tensions. But I feel like I haven't been successful in that. And there's already a lot that's seeped through. So getting rid of those and clearing my mind, because I feel like I'm in a reaction state, and being able to protect, but I also want to be loving. I still want to be loving and empathetic towards whatever's going on and whomever.
Well, first of all, understand that we are permeable. So this semi-permeable membrane that we talked about putting around your energy field and only allowing in the highest, it's an intention. It's an intention that we're creating to not be destroyed by the tensions of the world. So when you're in an environment where there is a lot of emotional rain, RAIN, of people who may have power, that you perceive to have power over you. Well, the first thing is to understand that any person only has power over us that we allow. And so that power is a reciprocal relationship. And if we decide that that person is abusing that power, then we can reorganize our attitude toward that person as a person that may not deserve the power that we've given them. And if that happens, then we re-empower ourselves. And then we have, in that situation, we are no longer victim. But when the rain starts to happen on us, it's the same in any relationship. When the relationship becomes dysfunctional, you reach above to the highest and you rain down love on that person, the highest best interest. And it has nothing to do with what you expect to get back. It has to do with their ultimate relationship with themselves. And so you are feeding the highest energy that you can manage to connect to. You are aiming toward that person for their higher growth. And the benefit to you is that you are no longer a victim. And so it changes the power dynamic ever so subtly. And you yourself become self-empowered by using your resources, which have nothing to do with the external power situation that may be in place. You use your resources to take yourself out of victim receiving abuse mode and become empowered spiritual person to bring white light into the environment because you have access. And you know that that's how flow is created. And so you are investing in the future flow in the relationship that someone else may benefit from. Doesn't matter, because you are benefiting by no longer being in a victim situation. Does that make any sense? Does it feel doable? So if it doesn't feel doable, can you possibly put it into a question?
It's overcoming the current weight in order to be able to rise to that level. There's
So
the weight of what I've allowed is already.
So that weight, see, when we enter into power relationships, we generally have a fantasy, and this isn't about you, this is about any power relationship that we're in. We generally have a fantasy about the other person and what we would like that relationship to be. And so we're relating to the situation as though that fantasy is the truth. And this is the truth of the beginning of any relationship, whether it be business, personal, whatever it is. Any relationship that we start, we fantasize about how beautiful it can be, what its best can be. And so we're bringing that expectation to the relationship. And all of our judgment about what happens has everything to do with where we are on that scale of our fantasy becoming a reality, instead of just dealing with the reality and kind of trying to decipher it for ourselves. And we all do this. We are creative beings, and we use our mind to create what it is that we would like to happen in any relationship. And so we have to step back in ourselves and say, which part of this is related to my fantasy and which part is related to the reality? And is life informing me of the reality? And I'm continuing to invest in the fantasy. And this happens in every relationship. It's really what we were talking about first thing off this morning with those wonderful questions. It's about, are we relating in the moment to the reality we are experiencing, or are we in reaction to the destruction of our fantasy? And the truth is both, always. And so the need to be honest about our fantasies and the reality as it shapes itself over time is really important, so that we are, in this dynamic system with a level of participation that's appropriate. And when we're invested in our fantasy, our level of expectation may have little to do with the reality of what's happening. And we all do this, and we experience it all the time. And then we're surprised when the outcome has nothing to do with our fantasy. It's like so far off our fantasy that we realize that we're not in the same playing field as the other person. And then we have to really reel it back and kind of, look at the truth again and again and again. And we all do this over and over and over. And it can get really confusing, because very often we are relating to a fantasy that has something to do with our past, usually with one of our parents or siblings, most often with a parent, that we are in reaction to because we have identified this person as being that person. And so we're completely confused in our reactions, and they have no idea who we are or what we're reacting to and relating to, especially in a business relationship that we've turned into a parental reenactment of our childhood, which we all do. And we're not saying this to you personally. This is,
Oh, that's, I can.
this is, no, this is something that we all do over and over and over, and it's called learning. Because it's how we evolve, is we misidentify what we're seeing as something from our past, and we are reacting in some way that looks like pure insanity to the other person, and they're reacting in some way that looks like pure insanity to us, and we can't draw the lines of the vectors of forces in any way that makes any sense. That's when we know we're in an evolutionary process, and that we just have to get quiet, stand back, clear ourselves of all reactivity, all judgment, and all expectation that we know what's happening and why it is, because we don't. And we know that because, we end up destroyed in some emotional way and feeling like a victim when we haven't done anything wrong, but we don't understand what's happening because both people are acting out of things that have no foundation in reality. Not no foundation, but it has to do with the past. And this happens all the time, over and over in our relationships. And this is how we grow. And it's always messy. That's just the way it is. But when we can own our part of the mess and clean it up regularly, then we learn faster. That's the great benefit, is we learn faster, and we actually begin to appreciate ourselves because we are engaging as much as we can in discovering the truth of who we are and why we're reacting in such an insane way to, something that should be very clear, but it's not. And this happens all the time. All the time. Yes. Oh, we see. Great. So
You can unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was trying to do something different, which was to ask you, Brenda, to post, if you have time, the last week's recording on YouTube, because there was an answer given to me that was very important and I can't remember it.
Got it.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm well. There's a lot going on that I don't understand yet, but very cool stuff. More sense of intuitive connection. That's quite powerful and miraculous. Maybe I can sort of segue into what I asked about last week, which is, while I'm sort of assimilating this and feeling into it, I feel like I've lost the part of my practice which is purely being open without agenda.
We need you to say a bit more about that. How does that impact you? What are you really telling us? Yes.
I have no idea. I'm still in that place of the kind of fearful place of that anything that I do that expands the energy that I'm in, that I have access to, will overload my system.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, this is difficult because Rebecca's experience of that is not systems overload, but awe and wonder that expansion can happen. And so what we're saying is that it's a matter of perspective. If you can cultivate awe and wonder like you would, the image that's coming to mind is a ride at an amusement park where you're exposed to a whole range of reactive emotions in a controlled environment, and it's pleasurable even though it's insane because what you're reacting to, I mean, it's a controlled environment, so you're safe, but at the same time you're having this whole range of feelings that you wouldn't normally have, and so it becomes a pleasurable experience. Well, if you understand that when expansion happens, it's similar to that, and there is no danger. There is absolutely no danger. That it's like getting off a Ferris wheel and still feeling like you're at the top and you can fall from a great height, even though your feet are on the ground. It's as though you've held that feeling and brought it into a situation where it's not appropriate. Does that make sense to you?
Not really. I wasn't, if I can say a little more, I wasn't, I'm not sure I asked the question from where I am right now, but I wasn't thinking about it in terms of fear, of overload in the sense of it's too much. I actually every day, every night when I take my medication so that I will be able to sleep because my nervous system is aroused and has to be sedated. I guess what I'm circling back around to is that I have physical consequences in my body, which are directly related to, which seem like direct consequences of the ways that I am trying to open myself.
Well, in a word, we would say that a nervous system that's overreactive to sensation is what we would call fear, which is why we phrase that hyperreactivity, we'll call it, without judgment. It's just a state that exists, and it exists as we're seeing it from a pre-birth experience that was sustained in the womb that has never been named as fear. that has never been owned because it doesn't feel like it's yours because it's not, but you were marinated in it. And so if you can understand it as a fear that was a gift from the womb, and we'll call it a gift because there is so much great learning available in the transcendence of this fear in yourself, that the practice of bringing white light to that fear and cleansing it yourself of it 100 times a day, as you reclaim your own access to your own energy, that it feels as though it is impenetrable because it came on before you were born. So it's the walls you cannot see, but they inhibit every breath that you take. But they are not intrinsic to your being as a human being. And it's possible for you to dissolve them by understanding that they are fear that can be brought into peace in you. And as we look at it from a medication perspective, it might be that anti-anxiety medicine would be more appropriate. And we're even going to make a recommendation. There is a medicine called hydroxyzine, which is actually an antihistamine that has as its side effect sedation, sleep inducing. And so it ends up being an anti-anxiety medicine that is not addictive, that its side effect is sleepiness, and it may actually be very helpful. We have never done this recommended a medication as an ASA, but they are accessing all frequencies and seeing the situation. Does this make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, if the physical symptoms are direct fear response, then yeah, totally.
That's what we're seeing. And that understanding will provide within it the way to work. Because for you, just breathing freely is an act of facing fear. Does that make sense?
And so that's the access point. I mean, to find the fear.
Well, you don't need to look to find it. You experience it as restriction and reaction all the time. But to define that as fear, rather than some inherent nervous system weakness that has to be sedated, it's redefining it that will allow you to no longer be victimized by it, but to begin to embrace it as a part of you that has always been misdirected because of the lack of information in your surroundings to teach you how to recognize, first of all, that it's a fear reaction, and then how to face fear and overcome it, which you have, this has been your life's work. So it's not like you haven't tried. We're not saying that at all. We're just redefining the arena as we're seeing it differently. Does that make any sense?
Yes. In practical terms, besides the, you know, in terms of my own work, I'm stuck on the fact that I don't, it totally makes sense to me that it's a fear that I don't know about because it was never.
You've never not had it.
Yeah. But
you've always known where it came from. You've always known that. I mean, not exactly, but we are reaffirming for you that it came from your womb experience. And that, you know, a lot of your difficulty in that arena can be localized to this reactivity. But understood as fear that was projected onto a tiny being as it was forming. So it's throughout your cells. And yes, it's a hyperreactive nervous system, but it's not something that needs to be sedated. It needs to be understood, embraced, and loved completely. And you have access to that. You do. You can run white light 100 times a day, healing your cells, cellular repair. This is your intention. This is not insurmountable, but it does require a lot of attention and intention sustained over a period of time to release yourself from this fear and live from your full energy, not vibrating through that limitation of, it's like an eggshell of fear that surrounds your energetic field. And understanding that that is a part of you that you can dissolve. You're the only person who can dissolve it. And you know, sedating it doesn't really work. It just puts it in a different location so you can survive. Drugs just create a barrier. Oh my goodness, we've gone way over time. We appreciate that you're all here still. So, do you have what you need, Wally?
yes, thank you.
Okay. We're a little bit stymied by what to do. So let's just sit for a few minutes and run white light through our cells, releasing anything that has been aggravated by our conversation today and bringing ourselves to a higher place. So let's just be together quietly for a few minutes and we will transmit. Standing under a shower of white light, letting it in. As we release everything that's not ours and any darkness within and around us. Everything that's not mine, please leave. We all say it. Thank you all so much for coming today. We completely enjoyed this program. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we did. So much love. Bye for now.